we have a huge disparity between male and female in humans, more so than almost any other animal, more so than any of the other primates. There's a name for that. It escapes me right now, the proper name. But if you go between, let's say, dogs or chimpanzees, the difference between male and female is not as large. It's not as they're the word's almost on the tip of my mind, but anyway, they're more alike.
Yeah.
Dogs, you get a female dog and a male dog, the same breed. Okay, the male's a little bigger, and but they both mostly do the same kind of things in the same kind of way. They have kind of the same sort of personalities that go with that breed. Yes, they have differences. The female and the male do have male characteristics and female characteristics, but they're shades. They're variations. Right. They're not totally different.
Yeah.
With humans, the differences are much greater than with any other what should I say? Not just primate, but those who breastfeed their young. What are we?
Mammals.
Mammals. Yeah, all the other mammals. We have something dimorphism, sexual dimorphism. That's the term. Sexual dimorphism. And among humans, it's very large. Lots of differences between the sexes. So we have to take that into account when the men are dealing with females, that it's almost like a different species. The women are from Venus and the men are from Mars. It's a very different way of thinking, processing, seeing the world, feeling space. All those things are just so different than us that we start making assumptions about what she said and what she means and where that's going. Those assumptions are almost always going to be wrong because we just don't understand her and where she's coming from, and vice versa. When a woman, hears this guy and she comes to her conclusions about what he means and what he's saying and where it all goes, they're almost certainly wrong. Now, they may be right in some aspects, but the nuances, the meaning, the stuff that's probably context, all of that is likely to be wrong or slanted or biased. Or it's just
so don't make assumptions or assume, or maybe assume that you're making assumptions.
Yeah. Just figure. If you're deciding what it is she means, you're making assumptions probably, and best to play that back to her. Yeah. Here's what I'm hearing you say, and see if that plays back. And if you do that back and forth 2 or 3 times, you'll probably hone in on, what's actually going on. So the first thing is communicate. Don't just be quiet. It used to be that talking about it was of no value whatsoever to men. It wasn't anything. The other men were not interested. Your problem, you deal with it. Men aren't really interested in other men's problems. Men do not have what's called own group preference. Women do. That's another one of those terms. Women need girlfriends. Women need the friendship and connection with other women. Women share with other women. They usually will have a clique or a group of women that all interact with each other. They're all friends and they all hang out and they all share everything. Men don't do that. Men don't form those groups. They don't have that. They basically stand alone. And if they have problems, they deal with them themselves. Another man will not be interested in your personal problems. Another man would say, well, that's your problem, not my problem. Go fix it yourself. Whereas women, they want to hear your problem. Oh, tell me what he said. Tell me what she said. And they're all about the he said, she said, and want to know. Men, not like that. their problem. They'll deal with it in their own way. You don't talk to other men about it. Other men don't care. They're not interested. We don't have that own group preference. We don't have little guy gangs that we, of our friends that we all, say everything to. Now, some men have very strong relationships with other men. It's not that men and men can't bond. They can, but it's a different sort of thing. They bond not in an emotional space, but in a physical space. They've got each other's backs. They'll watch out for each other in a physical space. They connect in that way. They'll come to each other's aid, but that's all in the outside space. That's not in the inside space. In the inside space, you're pretty much on your own. And if you have a best friend that you talk to, well, yeah, but you don't talk very long or very much or go too deep. You just kind of hit the high points and change the subject because that's the way men are. Also, men learn from a very young age that you don't get much help. It's the rule that men learn is suck it up, cupcake. Nobody's going to really help you out. Women get lots of help. Women need help. They look for help. A woman gets an illness or a problem, she'll run to a doctor. Doc, what's wrong with me? A guy gets ill, he'll just stay home. He's not going to go see a doctor. He'll get better on his own. We don't seek help because we have been taught that you have to do it on your own. It's your job to do, and you do it on your own. You don't have a lot of help. You're alone in this world mostly to get by or to do the work you have to do, deal with what you have to deal with, and you do it by yourself. You don't share it. You don't expect other people to come in and carry the load for you or help you. So that's kind of the way men are. And I think we needed to be that way in that, last 200,000 years, because that's how you're successful on that hunt or in that war. Everybody works together. Nobody is engaged in personal stuff. It's not about feelings. It's about getting the job done. Yeah. If your job is to chase the game in that direction and you sprain your ankle, too bad. You do your job anyway. Deal with the ankle later. You don't say, oh, I'm hurt. I'll have to sit down. No, you're expected to do your job. Everybody depends on you doing your job. So you suck it up, cupcake, and you do it anyway. So that's basically the way men are. They have to get things done, no excuses, nothing personal, keep all the personal stuff out of it. If you're in a battle of some sort, worrying about what your best friend's doing and how he's working out will just get you killed. You have to focus on exactly what's in front of you, exactly what the chore is, and everybody else is on their own. You're on your own. Now, yes, men work together, they cooperate, but they do that by rules and practice and finding the best cooperative solution they can. Men are good at cooperating with each other. Right. That comes easily for men to cooperate, but there's nothing personal. It's just to get the job done. Women who cooperate with each other also tend to form relationships. They get to know each other. They become friends. They have a personal connection as well. Men don't. It's just get the job done. And men bond with each other based on that level of cooperation. The caring is about caring to get the job done right, whatever that job is, whether it's a battle or a hunt or just finding stuff. An exploration. They cooperate with each other, get the job done. It's not personal. Yeah. And it can't be personal because men had mostly the dangerous roles. They get killed often. They don't come back from that battle. They don't come back from that hunt. Well, you can't sit around moaning and whatever. You got to go back out on the hunt the next day too. So somebody fills the slot and you go right back out, you do it again. If you had a lot of emotional things in that would get in your way. So you stuff the emotional stuff down. So none of that will get in the way of what you have to do, because every day is a challenge to stay alive and to take care of your women and your children and get the food. So that's part of the way men are the way they are. And it's good for the women to kind of understand that and not expect men to act like women and pour out their feelings and that sort of thing. You just can't get that out of a guy. We're not like that. So first, communicate, but realize how hard that is, which means try. You got to work at it. Don't make assumptions. Work out to find what that truth is. If you're a lady, give the guy time. He can't process things quickly like you do. You come to an instant feeling. It takes his feelings a week or two before they bubble up to the surface and he has some idea where he is. And if you keep pushing at him and pulling at him and pushing at him, all you're doing is making him more and more confused. He's less and less able to come to some sort of a conclusion, because every time you push at him and give him some other way to think about it, now that's added another 3 or 4 days to his processing time. And, so, this relationship thing is a difficult thing now, because this is not 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. It's now. And the skills and the things we needed then are not so valuable anymore. Men are not going on a hunt every day. Men are not warring every day. It's not a life and death struggle anymore. So we don't have to be, pushed around by those things. We have to realize, we guys have to realize that mode doesn't really serve us so much anymore. Now it's more important that you understand your woman friend and how she feels than it is that you find a chunk of meat that you can bring home to her. Finding the chunk of meat you can bring home to her, that used to be the most important thing, but it's not anymore. There are other things that are much more important than that, and you need to be aware of that. So again, don't get crossways with your instincts, but work with them more intelligently. Find your feelings. Get to know your feelings. Let your feelings come up, work with them, and eventually you and your feelings will be able to work together. But that's development. That's the development that men have to go through. They have to spend some time working with them feelings, voicing it, sharing them with someone, and probably not another man, because another man really isn't interested, but sharing them with your friend, with your female friends. How do you feel about that movie? How do you feel about this and that? Not what you think about it, but how did you feel about it? And most guys immediately say, well, I didn't feel anything about it, but here's what the plot was. And they'll go through all the mechanics of it, but they won't really tell you much about how they felt about it. But if you do have feelings, men have feelings, they just don't process them. They keep them in a wad out of sight someplace else. And practice, you can bring them up, you can identify them, you can feel them. And guess what, guys? Your life will be a lot richer and a lot better if you can do that.
Yes.
What served you 100,000 years ago isn't serving you so well now. And the more pressure we put on ourselves to be in tune with our environment and to be in tune with our feelings, the more quickly we're going to modify those instincts. So it's important. It's important to us and men in the future that we get this, because we're the ones that are kind of lead this process now of modifying our instincts to be more in tune with our environment. And that's that's a job we have to do. And it's something that we should work at. And finding our feeling space is going to be a part of that. It'll help us communicate with our women a lot better and more successfully. So I hope that answers your question, but that was kind
Fantastic.
of yeah.
And just to recap for everybody listening, so from what I understood you saying is to focus more on setting an intention to become familiar with your feelings, get to know them. I did recently read a study that talked about, I'll try to attach it below, I'll re-find it, talked about the science of how men switch from thinking to emotion, or what we oversimplify by saying left brain, right brain. It's actually a little more nuanced than left brain, right brain, but just for the sake of metaphorical alignment. And it was showing that women can click back and forth, like click, 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 click. But men, it took hours and hours or days to switch from from one phase to another, or like from one type of thinking to a feeling. And I thought that was interesting. Like biologically, they're not wired to flip-flop back and forth, probably for the reasons you mentioned. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you said was really important about communication, and that assuming nothing other than you're making assumptions. And by assuming that you're making assumptions, asking clarifying questions and being curious. So tuning into that curiosity about what do they mean, instead of the brain is a meaning maker. So the brain will always make meaning. Oh, they mean this, they mean that, based on its own experiential comparison. But they don't have the same experiential comparison as you. So I will also link a set of questions that I give to my clients when I work with men on communication. I'll link that below as well, so that you have a tool to look at questions and ask, so that you know what type of questions to ask when you're communicating with somebody else. So as men become more familiar with their emotions and more comfortable communicating those, do you see a shift into more of, what did you call it? The group, like, I see more men's groups evolving. I see more connection and emotional vulnerability between men. Do you think that's something that will continue to shift? Is that something that's important to do?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is a kind of a sign of the changing times. I don't think that ever existed before. I think if you go back to 500 years, you wouldn't find a men's group anywhere. If you did, it was in a bar and it was telling lewd stories or, that sort of thing. It was not what you're talking about, but men trying to relate to each other on an emotional basis is kind of a new idea. But it's a very important idea, I think. I'm very much in favor of that, as long as the men are given the freedom just to be themselves, that they're not being coached. They should be this way or they should be that way. I think it's better that they just find themselves in their own way. I know some groups perhaps start with this is the way men should be. And I don't think that's such a good idea, because everybody's different. So I think the groups shouldn't be working toward necessarily a specific goal, other than to open up, to share, to feel, to connect, and to see themselves not as just, what can I say, like the only person on an island, but rather to see themselves as part of a social group that's connected. Right. And everything that they do affects those other people. And the things that those other people do and say affect them. Yeah. And instead of having this mindset of I'm me, and I say stuff and it goes out there and you can do whatever you damn well please with it. Yeah. And you send stuff to me and I'll decide on what I do with it. That's kind of me alone on an island kind of thing. And I'm passing messages back and forth with other people who are alone on their islands. And it's not like that.
No.
We're all connected with each other, and the things I do affect you, the things you do affect me. So let's cooperate and work together so that we get the most out of the usness, those of us who are together. So if you have a men's group and it's kind of based on that idea that you're just going to interact, share, become familiar with your feelings, understand that other men have a lot of the same issues that you have. You're not alone on an island, just like you assume you are inside your head, because that's just, that's the way our instincts are. Every man's an island to himself. But realize that that's really not the case. There's a whole lot of people. There's a thing called culture, and that culture, is full of men and women, and you'd be surprised how many of them have your same issues and feelings and things that they're dealing with. And just that, and a sharing of how other people are doing it, you see, that's leading men to do over months what women do in a few days. They immediately find their girl gang, tell them everything, and then it's, and discuss. They're all in each other's business all the time. Now, men aren't going to do that, but these groups are kind of like the slow motion version of that. It may take a couple of months to get to the same place that a girl gang gets to in a couple of days, but that's all right. At least it opens that door of possibilities. So I think that's good. So if the one thing I have reservations about, if somebody comes to the conclusion that men should be like this, and then everybody works to be that way, every man there has a different interpretation of what that this is.
Right.
And some of them, their interpretation isn't going to be nearly as healthy as the person who's leading the group's intention is.
Right.
So it's for those men that are on that same channel as, let's say, the group leader, it's going to be a good thing. But for those who have a little twist on it, or a little their own sense of it, or their problems with it, they're left out, and they're being kind of pushed in a way that doesn't feel right, doesn't feel natural to them, and they'll eventually get up and go. They'll leave and won't come back. It's better to have it more open and say, we're working toward a few basic things like openness and sharing and having feelings, and not being afraid to admit that you have feelings and share them with other people. So, like going around a room and having people just talk.
Yeah.
Just the ability to stand up and say something about yourself, and then have a discussion about things that matter to you. That by itself is good, is really good. Yeah. So yes, we can focus on something general like openness, but openness will mean something different to every guy in that group. So to march toward kind of a single notion of openness, well, it's going to be problematic for some of the people in there. They won't be able to deal with it very well.
Right.
Some will get it. You'll probably find that, maybe 20-30% of the people really seem to get into the group and work well, and the rest of them kind of flounder around out on the edges. Well, that's because they're trying to fit their square peg into your round hole, and it isn't fitting very well.
It's trying to solve the problem with the same energy that created it, which is fit in, conform to this, rather than allowing that divinity of diversity and allowing, you're like that and that's okay, and you're like that and that's okay, and that's a good way to be a man, and that's a good way to be a man, and sort of exploring that. That makes a lot of sense. And people can only input information based on their own level of consciousness. So I do notice that in circles where whoever is leading the circle might be talking. If you're speaking just metaphorically in grade 10 to people in grade 4, they're not going to necessarily mean it or understand it the way you're using those words to describe. Exactly. And then it might create more shame or more not being able to fit in, or more inferiority.
Exactly.
Yeah, instead of just expressing what it is. And I agree with you, because I work with men all over the world. I can attest that a lot of them feel safe to open up to me, which I love, But I sometimes chuckle after they'll say something and they'll say, well, I just shared that with you. That's so private. I'm the only one that feels that way. And I'm like, you're the third guy that said that to me in 24 hours. Like they all think they're the only one that feels that way. They feel lonely, misunderstood, like something is missing. And they don't think that other men feel that way. And they might be standing in a room with 5 other men talking about the weather, but none of them are saying, I feel really frustrated or I feel lonely. Do you feel lonely? Or, just having that open dialogue with each other.
Yeah, no, they would never say that. And if one of them did, they'd probably be ostracized.
Yes.
They'd probably be pushed out to the side and the other men would continue on being manly.
Yes.
That's something you can't overcome that very easily. But you're right. See, everybody's different. And the same with any group at any level is only going to be as successful as their leader is successful in getting rid of their own biases. The leader has to get there first. They have to own it and be there, and they have to have given up their ego to the point that they can really connect and relate with other people. When you have a leader who's says, well, I've figured it out. I've gotten there and I figured all this out. Now I'm going to help the rest of you be like me. That doesn't work.
No.
That doesn't work at all. You can't have that kind of leadership. You don't lead from the front like in a battle. Follow me, You lead from the back like, here's an idea, here's a suggestion. What do you think about it? You let your people kind of lead where they go. But so it's all in the quality of the leadership. It doesn't matter whether you're president of a country or whether you're a kindergarten teacher. If you're leading from a place of self-centeredness, I know, and I'm going to teach you to know like me.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a good teacher.
No.
You have to teach at the level of your students are. Yeah. And typically a classroom of students are on all different kinds of levels, which is a very difficult problem for the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think finding metaphors and models that can meet anybody where they're at with the least amount of sort of dogma or belief systems attached to it, and just giving people things that they can try so they can have their own experience of whatever that is. And if this tool of meditating doesn't work for you, or breath work, or this doesn't work for you, great, there's no problem. There's like 50 other tools. Go try them and see which one is a great experience for you and see which ones you do not prefer. That's how we develop discernment rather than, I agree, rather than following this linear, this is how I did it. Like, I'm not going to tell everybody, go sit in a forest in Canada by yourself and meditate alone for 5 years. Like, probably don't do that. It's probably not the easiest or most practical way to, to face your ego.